Hi, my besties.
I'm gonna be talking while I need some tea. We're gonna be talking about some books today. Let me give you a little background. Got a Barnes & Noble gift card for like $75, which at Barnes & Noble only gets you like 3 books. I couldn't think of any books to get because so I decided to just get classic books. So like books that if you look up greatest books of all time, these come up. So the 4 books that I will be reviewing today / giving my 2 thoughts about are The Handmaid's Tale, Go Set a Watchman, Lolita, and Lord of the Flies. So we're gonna start off with, and it's the copy I don't have with me, which is The Handmaid's Tale. So let me give a plot summary. So The Handmaid's Tale is set in a dystopian America. Basically, America has fallen and has been taken over by a religious, anti-everything government regime called the Sons of Jacob. And the new America is called Gilead, and basically all women that are fertile / can have children, which that's a whole reason why they took over, was because the birth rate and fertility rate just dropped. So any woman that is fertile is forced to be what they call a handmaid. Basically, they are forced to have relations with the commanders, which are like all the male leaders, and they're forced to have their children. It's a really cute upbeat book. The Handmaid's Tale, listen. I'm just gonna say it. The Handmaid's Tale is boring as I'm sorry, but the book is just
So boring.
for having a plot that cool and that fascinating, and like you could have so much commentary around it. It was just boring. The only parts of the book that I found interesting, at least as a reader, was prelude scenes to where it's showing the demise of America before Gilead. Here are some reasons why I didn't like the book, besides it just being boring, okay? The characterization is kind of bad. No matter what book I read, I always feel like I have a deep connection with the character. Whether I like them or not, I can always understand their psyche. I feel like I know them. With this book, I feel like I don't understand any of the characters, especially June and Offred. I just feel like I don't know anything about her or her psyche, and maybe some people disagree with that, but I just felt very not in tune with the characters while reading it, and I felt like I didn't grow to care for them because I felt like they weren't developed that well. I'm sorry, Margaret Atwood, I love you, girly. I will say though, I think the writing of the actual book, like the writing style, is really good. Like I think it's a pretty easy book to read, so anyone at all levels could read it. So I'm gonna end each book as well with a rating. So out of 5 stars, I give Handmaid's Tale a solid 3.5. I think it could be a bit more interesting and there was a lot more potential, but Margaret Atwood is kind of a genius in creating this plot. So let's move on now to one I actually have a physical copy of, which is Go Set a Watchman by Harper Lee. So To Kill a Mockingbird is actually technically a spin-off of this book. So Harper Lee wrote Go Set a Watchman first. Before To Kill a Mockingbird, she wrote this book, and her editor was like, yo, those flashbacks you write to Scout's childhood are really good. You should make a whole book about that. So there was born To Kill a Mockingbird. Then coincidentally, right before / when Harper Lee died, they decided to publish this unfinished manuscript. So Go Set a Watchman takes place 15 or so years after the events of To Kill a Mockingbird. So this is basically detailing Scout, who no longer goes by Scout, by the way, in the book, and that's so weird. She only goes by Jean Louise, which is her real name. And she basically goes to visit Maycomb, and she lives right now in New York City with her fiance. But when she's back, she just starts to see the underbelly of her hometown. The main plot is that she discovers there's basically, I literally don't think there's any other way to put it, but just like an anti-black council in their town, and she finds out some people that she loves. This is gonna be a spoiler right now, such as her fiance and Atticus are on the council. So that is the main reason why actually most people hated the book, was because it hurt to see Atticus Finch, you know, this champion for civil rights, and To Kill a Mockingbird be a full racist in this next book. And also they killed off Jem unceremoniously in like the first 5 pages, and that really hurt. So number one, this is definitely just a first draft, and I really would have liked to see if Harper Lee could have edited this and gave us a really good version, because I think think there's so much potential with this, but it definitely gives off first draft. So believe it or not, I didn't really dislike anything in this book. I felt everything was generally fine. Like, it wasn't spectacular really anything, but I don't really have anything specific about the book I didn't like. But so I want to go into the reasons why I did like this and why I recommend it. So number one, this book was so easy to read. The Harper Lee, that's why I liked To Kill a Mockingbird so much, because I feel like her writing style is super easy to read and super accessible to most people. But the other reason why I really did like this was because I feel like the plot is something that a lot of people can relate to. When you come from literally the same place she does, New York City, and then go to your small town and you are away from it for so long, you start to really see the reality of it when you go back. And it's really hard, and she struggles really hard with it. So do I recommend you read this? Yes. I recommend this if you like To Kill a Mockingbird. If you didn't like it, you probably won't like this. But I give it a solid 3 stars out of 5. Next up, we have Lord of the Flies. I have such strong feelings about Lord of the Flies. But we're gonna start with a basic plot summary in case you don't know what it's about, which I don't know how, because I think it is required in some schools. It was not required in my school. Lord of the Flies is basically about a group of boys. I think the age range is from 6 to 12. Basically, their plane crashes and the survivors, which is literally only these young boys, are left deserted on this small island. That's kind of the plot. It's just them trying to build a society and function together and live together on this island. So now I want to get into what I like about the book first. The plot is fan-freaking-tastic. What an amazing concept. There's so much discourse and conversations and themes that can be discussed from this book, and it's so fascinating, and I absolutely love it for that. Like, this last line of the book haunts me. Basically, the boys have resorted by the end of the book to be savages, and they're like killing each other. They're crazy, right? And then as they're about to kill our main character, Ralph, an officer comes on the beach and they're here to rescue them. As soon as they see the officer, these kids, and they just start bawling and they resort back to being kids again. Oh, it's so good. Listen to this last line. This is the best line of the whole book. Ralph wept for the end of innocence, the darkness of man's heart, and the fall through the air of the true, wise friend called Piggy. Oh, it's so good. With that in mind, those are the only things I liked about the book. So I want to talk about why
I hated reading this book.
the writing, man. William Golding, I hate you, man. His writing style is so freaking difficult to read. 2 things I want to put in about his writing. 1, he writes exactly like how Mark Twain wrote. I was reading this and I felt like I was reading Huck Finn again, because the thing that made me so unfathomably angry reading Huck Finn was that Mark Twain's writing is so difficult to read, and it's not even because of like dialect or anything. It's because he writes so nonchalantly about everything, and I know that seems hard to do as a writer, but he does it, and William Golding does it too in this book. For example, like if a character dies, as does in Lord of the Flies, you know, it's kind of like a big deal. You know, like they build it up with suspense. They, you know, at least say the words and then he died. Not in this one. No, they don't even state that he died. Which, like, you could say, you know, we all are left to assume. But it was like with everything, it was never stated. It was just like you were supposed to just know. There was no suspense in this book. There were no climaxes. There was no like rising action. It just felt very monotone the whole book until the last 20 pages. The other thing I didn't like about reading this was, honestly, I hate to say it because it's gonna make me sound like that I have an IQ of 7. But
he uses big words, okay?
so it was so hard to get through, dude. This took me, like, I could only read 15 pages at a time just because it would make my brain hurt and I was bored. And it sucks that it feels that way when I was reading it because, like I said, the plot is amazing and I love it so much. But just the book was so frustrating to read. It's really good themes and amazing plot, but just bad execution. But some of you may like the execution, you know what I mean? I'm torn. You know what? I'm giving it a 3. We've come to the last book, the most controversial one. I'm gonna just end the video there. Lolita, if no one knows, it's probably one of the most controversial books in literature. So let me tell you what the plot of the book is. Basically, a 44-year-old man who in the book goes by the pseudonym Humbert Humbert. The whole book is him narrating / reading from jail the story of how he fell in love with a 12-year-old girl named Dolores Hayes, who he calls his Lolita, and basically details their whole tumultuous relationship and how he ended up in jail. With that in mind, from the plot summary I just gave you, you would be right to be like, that's a disgusting piece of vile literature about pedophilia. Why would you want to read this, right? It's not at all what I thought it was going to be, nor is it at all what anyone in the media had said it was. So that tells me they probably didn't read it. Why I think this, you may ask? Let's get into it. First, I'm going to get off with what I didn't like about it. And honestly, guys, there was really nothing in this book I liked. I'm not like about to redeem Lolita or anything. The book was boring, dude. Like, nothing happens in this book. For the plot summary I gave you, you would think at least it'd be entertaining. Like, at least interesting things would be happening. No, literally nothing happens in this book. And even when they do, it lasts like a page, and then that's it. It does not get interesting, really, ever. And it's so hard to read. Nabokov's writing style is super hard to understand. It's the same with how I feel about this as I did with Lord of the Flies, to where, like, unless you're an English major, I feel like this book is very inaccessible to most people because the language and vernacular is just words we don't use. So it's kind of hard, in my opinion. That's why I didn't like it, was solely because it was boring and it was hard to read and difficult to understand. Now I want to get into my thoughts about Lolita. It's often classified as an erotic romance or a romance novel. It is not either of those at all. There's no intimate scenes in the book. There's mentions of it to where he'll be like, we just made love, or they'll like prelude to it and then it'll cut from there. I think the thing people misconstrued about the book is that it glamorizes or like tries to redeem Humbert Humbert, but it really doesn't, because in the novel, Humbert literally, one of his like opening lines is how he acknowledges he ruined her life and how what he did to her was horrible. You know, if it had just been a simple like him falling in love with this girl and that was it, I would understand why people hate it. But that's not it at all. It's simply him telling how he ruined her life, literally. And it's so clear in the novel that he did ruin her life, because at the end, when we see her 3 years after they first met, she's already pregnant, having a kid with a shitty husband. Like, it's clear her life went on a downward spiral from when she met him. And like, he didn't even disagree with any of the people that were trying to arrest him or stuff. Like, he understood what he did was wrong. And I mean, I still say viewer discretion if you are going to read this, just if, you know, it can still be pretty triggering. I personally don't think it should be classified as a romance or even erotic romance. The fact that it was classified as that for a while is so messed up, dude. I mean, I still hate it because I just could not understand a word Nabokov was saying, and it was really hard to read, and it was long and boring. I personally don't think really anything deep can be said about the book. Like, I don't think there were any themes in here that could be good discourse. I think this is just purely a story to tell, and I appreciate it for that. You know, sometimes I think movies and books and TV try to be too deep, and some of the best things are just simple stories. So I give this a solid 2 out of 5. I just hated reading this. Alright, so those were all the books that I wanted to review today. Thank you for listening to me rant about random books. I will see you in the next one. Bye, my besties!